Criminals in lab coats, hiding every mark, twisting test and sample, leaving justice dark. Sonja with her demons, dancing through the haze, evidence in shambles, lost inside the maze. Power built on lies, on powdered broken dreams. Farak's world collapsing, stitched with silent screams. Prosecutors silent, bought by pride and greed. Criminals, yes criminals, scheming in the dark, forsaking codes of honor, tearing cases apart. In the heart of science, truth's a fragile spark. Forensic worlds corrupt, a tainted art.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Criminals. Yes, criminals in forensic science. This is episode number 2. This one is about Sonja Farak. She's a former Massachusetts crime lab chemist. In January 2014, she pled guilty in crimes related to evidence tampering and drug possession. Sentence, 18 months. 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service. Charges: 4 counts of tampering with evidence, 4 counts of theft of a controlled substance from an authorized dispensary, 2 counts of possession of cocaine. So, from what I was reading, instead of like larceny of possession of drugs, that is when I think you steal from another person. But when you are stealing from an authorized dispensary, I think that's when you're stealing from an actual like business. And even though the crime lab, I wouldn't consider it a dispensary, but maybe in law it is because it's an institutionalized place. So that was something new that I learned. And this case is interesting because it is tied to episode 1 about Annie Ducan. They are both former Massachusetts crime lab chemists. Both of them worked in different labs, and together I think it's over 60,000 cases that were affected by their crimes. Now, this one is special because I was reading that there was a class action suit, which I will get more into later. And I think while that was happening, there was a gag order because of the nature of the suit. However, I don't know if that gag order is still in place. I have noticed that there is a lot of information about Sonja Farak, but it's all regurgitated. Every article that I've read is the same information. I wasn't able to find which prison she was in or her inmate number like I was for Annie Ducan. So it looks like there was like an approved amount of information that was allowed to be released, and that's what all the news articles wrote about. And so I think that's very interesting that we came across another gag order. I also have to wonder why she doesn't have a Wikipedia page. I mean, not that that's important, but I think that's odd. I also looked for alternative information that maybe went against the mainstream media narrative just to be thorough. And it was very difficult to find any, and an hour had gone by, and with very little to no results, I stopped. Anyway, let's get into it. So Farak accepted a position as a crime lab chemist in 2004 at Amherst Drug Lab, located at the University of Massachusetts Amherst campus. She worked there up until her arrest in 2013. Farak tested suspected drugs to determine if they were illegal. These drugs were the confiscated drugs from real ongoing cases. Farak abused drugs while at work. Farak's drug use escalated to include methamphetamine, cocaine, LSD, crack, and other substances. Farak began using drugs on site at work, but it eventually went home with her. And then it was first thing in the mornings. Farak abused drugs while at work. Farak even manufactured crack cocaine while on site and smoked it in the lab bathroom. Like, where was everybody? Farak was arrested in 2013 and admitted that she stole laboratory drugs and was under the influence of methamphetamine, cocaine, LSD, and other drugs while working and testifying. Wow, even testifying? In January 2013, a coworker noticed some samples were missing. Subsequent investigations revealed that prosecutors withheld critical information about the extent of her misconduct. As a result, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ordered the dismissal of over 24,000 drug convictions linked to her work. The scandal also led to disciplinary actions against prosecutors involved in the cover-up. In 2015, Farak was released from prison after serving about 13 months of her 18-month sentence. June 2017, an investigation into Farak's prosecution began, and it was discovered two prosecutors, Ann Kaczmarek and Chris Foster, failed to turn over exculpatory evidence. June 2017, the Massachusetts Supreme Court ordered disbarment of Ann Kaczmarek for intentional and egregious misconduct, withholding exculpatory evidence. Massachusetts Attorney General's office purposely hid information about Farak's misconduct and allowed Foster to help Kaczmarek with discovery requests and had signed her name to the court filings. Kaczmarek's supervisor, John C. Verner, was also aware of the misconduct. Kaczmarek thought Farak's drug use and tampering was limited to cocaine and thought the drug use began in 2012. This would have been shortly before Farak's arrest in 2013. There are speculations that this drug use happened before 2004. According to Kaczmarek, Farak returned drugs to police that looked like they had been switched out. She thought these were only a few one-offs. According to Kaczmarek, in a case from 2005, she noticed cocaine was returned at a lower weight. Farak also failed to turn over behavioral health notes and worksheets that were found in Farak's car after Farak was arrested in 2013. These documents showed Farak struggled with drug use while on site at work and that Farak had been to rehab a few times. Investigators were able to determine when Farak used drugs during work hours. Farak had a journal where she documented which cases were coming in and when, and next to those cases, she would write a note about how she was feeling at the time. She was also in and out of rehab at that time, so these were documented relapses. In November 2017, more than 6,000 cases were dismissed. In January 2018, that number rose to 8,000 cases dismissed. In October 2019, a class action suit was filed against the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, including the District Attorney's Office, due to misconduct of former state chemists Sonja, Farak, and Annie Dukan, a class action lawsuit. The class was certified in May 2020 and includes all persons who were convicted of state drug offenses under Massachusetts law, had their convictions vacated and dismissed without the prospect of re-prosecution due to the misconduct of Farak and Dukan, and as a result could assert claims for monetary relief under relevant legal precedents. Beyond the class action, individual lawsuits have been filed against specific prosecutors involved in the Farak case. For instance, Rolando Pennant against former Assistant Attorney General Ann Kaczmarek and others, alleging violations of his constitutional rights due to their handling of evidence related to Farak's misconduct. In June of 2022, a federal judge rejected Kaczmarek's claim of qualified immunity, allowing the lawsuit to proceed. These legal actions underscore the extensive impact of the misconduct at the Massachusetts state drug labs and the subsequent efforts to seek justice and compensation for those affected. In total, more than 24,000 convictions in 16,449 cases were dismissed. In 2023, former state prosecutor Ann Kaczmarek was disbarred for violating defendants' due process rights by failing to disclose key evidence related to misconduct. It stated that Sonja Farak used drugs for over 9 years, specifically on site, And during testimony, in the years that she was employed as a chemist in the Amherst Drug Lab. In addition, it's likely longer than 9 years. Farak began her career at the William H. Hinton State Laboratory Institute located in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts in 2003. She worked there for approximately 1 year before transferring to the Amherst Drug Lab. It is speculated that the drug use began in the Hinton Crime Lab.
Every guilty sentence, every ruined name, buried by the system, swallowed by the shame. Defendants thrown to wolves, science built on lies, always cracks and falls. Criminals, yet criminals, scheming in the dark, forsaking codes of honor, tearing cases apart. Innocence forgotten, locked behind steel bars, while schemers toast to fortune under tainted stars. Farak's hands still linger, ghosting every case. A fingerprint of chaos time cannot erase.
So while researching information that goes against the mainstream media, I came across this Reddit post. It says, Sonja, Farak, accidental hero? Inadvertently freed people wrongfully incarcerated for minor offenses in the fake war on drugs, while simultaneously exposing an outdated and corrupt judicial system. The entire system is a disgrace, and her drug use made the most fantastic mockery of it. Sonja, Farak, I salute you. I don't know if I would go as far as to agree with this post, but I do think something is here. And yes, her behavior, as terrible as it is, shined a light on what can happen without anybody watching. And so it's hard to know if these things are actually happening while they're happening. And I do think that there is an element here of when they're happening, before they're realized, it is affecting and changing and making the system work in a very dangerous way, very evil kind of way. So recently there have been some red flags with a different forensic scientist, a DNA lab analyst, who will be testifying in the Brian Koberger case. Riley Nolan will be testifying as a rebuttal witness for the state, and she will testify to transfer DNA. She is currently the lab director of the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab in Meridian, Idaho. And her opinion of the mechanism of DNA transfer, whether it is direct or indirect, has other DNA analysts around the world concerned and calling her out publicly, because it is now known that there's been an evolution in trace transfer, or quote-unquote touch DNA. The scientific community is majority in agreement where they want to hold off on opining on how and when the DNA arrived on an object, because they are realizing that it's not possible to determine how or when the mechanism of transfer, whether it's direct or indirect. Nolan has stated in some state motions that she is going to tell the jury that she believes that it's direct transfer because of the amount of the DNA. However, this is exactly what the scientific community has been advising against. There was also a recent American Academy of Forensic Science event, and the event was broken up into AI, and the other part was the how and the when of the DNA. They had workshops on it. This is a big administrative global standardization of DNA standards and procedures, and she should know that more than anyone. And this principle is bigger than just having the majority of the scientific community agree not to opine for the how and the when of the DNA, because the scientific community is trying to implement global standardization and basic fundamental principles of trace transfer, quote-unquote touch DNA, and the mechanism of transfer, whether that is direct or indirect. I'm not directly saying that the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab in Meridian, Idaho, managed by Riley Nolan, is doing anything nefarious, but these are the signs and the red flags that indicate something could be going on, and it is definitely worth a look.
Move over, Riley, your bias is showing. Catastrophic flaws and all too many errors too much at stake. The how and when of DNA is more than just opinion play. Come on, Riley, stop pretending, drop the trick.
That brings us to episode number 3 of Criminals. Yes, Criminals in Forensic Science. But this one I have to add an almost Criminals because episode 3 is about Yvonne Missy Woods. Allegedly deleted data and DNA tests and DNA software. Missy is a former DNA analyst and a former DNA expert witness. Her preliminary hearing is May 9th, 2025. Total of 102 charges for crimes related to allegedly falsifying DNA evidence. Charges: 52 counts of forgery, 48 counts of attempt to influence a public servant, 1 count of perjury in the first degree, 1 count of cybercrime. The cybercrime is supposed to be the heaviest of all of the penalties. So I'm interested to see how that plays out in her case. So what we will do is we will have episode 3 just to get us familiar with her story. And then hopefully we'll be able to go through her preliminary hearing and maybe we'll learn something. So this is exciting because her trial is happening in real time. So if you want to learn more about Sonja, Farak, and Annie Dukan, like I mentioned in episode 1, there is a documentary on Netflix called How to Fix a Drug Scandal. It will go through Sonja Farak's story and case in further detail, and also Annie Dukan's case in further detail, and how this type of corruption affects the system and what type of people it reaches. And I know that we keep hearing more and more stories like this, especially in regard to forensic science. So if you're interested to see the trailer for the documentary How to Fix a Drug Scandal, the link is below in the description box, and then here is a little clip.
I was smoking at the lab, smoking at home. I actually smoked in the evidence room. I was totally controlled by my addiction.
At these drug labs, a single chemist can do thousands of cases a year.
It wasn't really clear the extent to which things had gone wrong.
She didn't realize how many people it would harm.
And it turns out it's not just one, but 2 chemists.
This was one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in the history of Massachusetts.